Peace to the universal family. What's good? Welcome, welcome. Good to see you all back. And let's see. Just seeing if I got the chat on. Okay, let me see. Let me say peace to the chat. Peace to the universal family in the north, south, east, and west region. I come in the name of Earth. I go by Say Love or Say Love. And this is our mentorship and advocacy program. Normally we're live 4 o'clock every Monday. Today we had a little delay with things going on in the workplace. So pardon coming on a little bit late today, but here we are, 4:30 on this Monday. And just a little recap, a reintroduction. I'm still new. I'm brand new. I've been saying this for a minute, but I'm still new to OBS software. So right now I'm just going live on YouTube without the software. We are developing, I'm in the early phases of developing a resource. Again, I'm not someone that usually goes live. I just started doing some virtual art classes back in November for Hip Hop History Month. And then as things progressed, in this first quarter, we thought, well, maybe I should come on live and speak, a couple times a week. So we're in the early phases of that as I develop kind of like a podcast or, a resource for the people. So right now we are calling Mondays our mentorship and advocacy program. This is a resource and tool I'm developing due to my experience and my work in the field as a youth worker, recovering missing children, and so forth. So this is Monday, 4 o'clock, 4 to 5, mentorship and advocacy program. And this resource is now available. We are still waiting for our copies. It's been quite a delay, not expected, but there was just a few issues with getting it shipped out. So inshallah, should be here. I'm really hoping we got them by next Monday, and then I can deliver them to my clients and so forth. And for anyone who wants to order, you can actually order the workbook from the website at earthsaylove.com/mentorship. So you can get that. Yeah, and that outlines it's basically a roadmap for the year. It includes calendars, weekly planners, but then also there's a 52 topic sequence I came up with. It doesn't go into like so much definitions at all. It's actually a space for note taking and for exploration and so forth, which is why it's going to coincide with these lives that we're developing and the content we're developing. So it's a resource that is, hot off, fresh. It's very fresh and brand new. So thank you for being our very first followers and listeners and audience and part of this resource as it develops. One small announcement. Well, I don't know if it's small, but on Wednesdays, in conjunction with Mondays, in conjunction with the Mentorship and Advocacy Program Concept, MAP, on Wednesdays, we've been having Women's Empowerment Day, celebrating our wins on Wednesday. Also, I'm dubbing it the Women's Empowerment Network, celebrating our wins. This is not actually it. My printer, I don't know, I'm having an issue. I don't know if I ran out of ink, but this was kind of the logo I was coming up with. I'm just starting with some real basic concepts for now because that's all I could really work with. I'm not a graphic designer or a logo maker, but who knows? Maybe I'll be good at this if I continue. So I did complete a journal over the weekend. I can't really, this is, like I said, my printer's not really working, but it kind of looks like that in the background. This one, I don't know what happened with the ink. It completely messed up. But if you do, if you find me on Amazon, which you will, if you go to earthsaylove.com, you can find some photos that are hyperlinked to our Amazon, or if you go to the earthsaylove.com/mentorship, you'll find the link to Amazon on there as well. So if you want to find it, I'm not so much, again, I don't have a copy. It's brand new. Actually, you know what? It's probably not even going to be on there until Wednesday. So my apologies. I shouldn't have mentioned it, but that will be coming up. And the concept of that, it's just, I thought, the workbook is perfect. That's what we actually need. The journal is just maybe something optional. I thought for myself, I would like to have a journal that coincides for Wednesdays and what we're striving to develop in terms of Mondays going into topics, developing a resource to educate about prevention education and in the scope of human trafficking. And then on Wednesdays, I want to build a powerful women's empowerment network, celebrating women, celebrating our young sisters, and just basically providing inspiration and a platform beyond just educating ourselves about the risks out there and how to protect our young ladies from the elements that are out there these days. So that is the concept. We didn't want it to be all one way or the other. So we were able to have the prevention education piece as well as the empowerment piece. On Fridays, we were previously doing the live art session during the weekly jazz radio program that I produce, 2 hours every Friday, 6 to 8. However, right now, just with developing these other things, I'm not going live with the art right now. It's just too much on my schedule. But I do have it live on my YouTube channel. So you can tune in either at mainpublic.org, where you can go to the Main Public Classical stream. You can tune in on any of the local FM stations if you're local to that region. Or you can, while it's on, it'll also be on my YouTube channel and our subdomain, jazzflower.mainpublic.org. I usually have all the info in the bottom. I might need to update that. I might not have put it there, so I will update that in the description. But that's basically our public calendar for the things that are being developed. Um, and again, I just ask that everybody that's part of this movement, part of this following, is respectful, has professional boundaries. And I will get into that. We will get into laying some more ground rules and regulations that normally is something that we do when we do like small groups or presentations in classrooms. It's a little bit different when you're one-on-one, but we still want to lay that groundwork as well. Whereas like if I'm working with a youth one-on-one, of course, anything they share with me is confidential, but then there's also, if it's a situation where someone's going to get hurt, or they're going to hurt somebody, or someone's going to hurt them, like a real safety issue, those are things I'm not, as mandated reporters, we cannot keep those things to ourselves. Those are things we do have to report to, usually we have to consult with our supervisor and just say, this is the situation. I've been doing this long enough. I usually know the go-to. Of course, I never like to, when I'm in a situation like that, I inform my youth. I'm not somebody that goes behind. I'll let them know, like, this is an issue. I'm going to have to go to this person and let them know X, Y, and Z. So, we hold, we hold integrity, accountability, and transparency very high in this field. Um, there's a lot of things that, are just really, we need to keep a very high code of ethics in this field, especially when it comes to confidentiality. Like, we would never want to come on our own platform and really speak to somebody else's plight or anything of that nature. I've seen so many things being in this field so long where, unfortunately, not everybody is aware of the ethics and the sensitive nature of these sort of discussions about any sort of, you know, any sort of violence or trauma or, sexual assault, abuse, trafficking. So those are very sensitive topics, and we hold confidentiality and our ethics extremely high, extremely high. So for me to be able to even get on and speak on these things, it's like, again, it's a work in progress to really figure out where we can do that in a manner that's informative, but also just holding that high level of integrity and protecting um, protecting our inner circle, which that's everybody in my field, everybody in my, my workspace, everybody, within my personal cipher and my professional cipher as well. So yeah, so that is just a little bit of groundwork, a little bit about the schedule, and reminding you of what we're doing here. And for those, again, the workbooks have not been delivered yet. So a few were sent out to those that ordered it. So if you do want to order it, you can order it right off the website at ursalove.com/mentorship. And if you want, if you want to, that's optional. But if you choose to do that, you could be one of the first to actually follow along as we develop this resource. This is our first year. So the 2023 Almanac is our first. So that is an option. Just, ask that you do respect our intellectual property, and that you respect, everything that we're doing here, and have healthy professional boundaries. We highly appreciate that. So we have a 52 topic sequence within the mentorship and advocacy program workbook. So if we were in the workbook, again, I don't have a copy. I will show you as soon as I get it. I'm really hoping we have it next Monday. But in the workbook, we would be on week 15. So it would be this 15th sequence within our 52 topic sequence. I was able to structure it in such a way, being that there are 52 weeks in a year, I was either going to go through the alphabet twice, or do the alphabet once and then have 2 weeks per letter. That seemed a little bit easier to me, or not easier, but like easier for people to follow along that way, like easier to follow. So 14 weeks brings us through letter G, the seventh letter. So the 15th week is the first week of the eighth letter, which is H. So again, this is the 15th sequence. So I just want to share some knowledge that I have been blessed to be empowered to hold, and to show and prove my equality by sharing this information with all of you, in terms of the topic of, I need some sound effects, human trafficking. So again, there were so many things I could fit in the alphabet. So I was very mindful of what I was selecting and how the whole flow. Certain topics, they may, there'll be topics that are not in the 52 topic sequence that are still covered. But I needed to organize them in such a way. So this being sequence 15, the topic is human trafficking. So, and again, I just want to say thank you for bearing with me. It's taking a little time for me to get everything on the level of professionality that I desire to have here. So thank you for your patience as we just jump right in. So human trafficking, of course, first question is, what is human trafficking? So let's just jump into how it is defined. So, goodness gracious. So human trafficking involves, and this is according to the Department of Homeland Security, human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. So human trafficking is just what I said. It's using force, fraud, or coercion to obtain labor, which may include sex labor. That's one form of human trafficking. Oftentimes, we think of human trafficking as synonymous with sex trafficking. That's not the case. It's inclusive of sex trafficking, but there's also human trafficking that does not include sex trafficking. So just to be clear, someone could be a survivor of a form of human trafficking, and it could have nothing to do with sex trafficking. So I just want to cover those bases to be clear. So the two main forms we hear about, of course, are labor trafficking and sex trafficking. So labor trafficking really is a broad term that would cover any form of forced labor. We think of like things like, sweatshops and, those sort of things come to mind when I think of forced labor. Of course, the laws vary in different countries, different nations, uh, different states, laws vary. We have certain laws here that other nations don't adhere to. But like for example, we tend to think of like harsh labor for minors, for children, to that being a form of labor trafficking. So again, laws vary, so that's something to be mindful of. But it is forced labor, forced fraud, or coercion. So it's something that one way that we see the international trafficking often, um, and the more vulnerable population does tend to be women and children, although men can be trafficked as well, absolutely. But we do see it more with women. Um, One of the ways it can happen is, if it is international, if it's not just strictly domestic, in my organization, we deal with predominantly domestic trafficking. Although I've worked on cases before I got to this organization of recovering missing children that were international and across state jurisdictions. So I do have international experience. Um, but suffice it to say, when we're dealing with international trafficking, often that could be they're promised some form of labor. So they may travel internationally, and then they'll find that once they do travel, if they had any documentation, it has been um, taken from them, or maybe they didn't have the proper documentation in the first place. And so that now they're being forced to continue in a form of labor, basically either told that if they do this, if they fulfill this labor, they will get their documentation, or um, or they're earning their keep, something of that nature. So they're being, by force, fraud, or coercion, they're being led to believe that they must do this labor. Oh, pardon, I do need to make this call back. Um, so that is essentially human. Again, it can be many different ways, and I don't want to say that it doesn't happen to men. It does, but it's more common for any vulnerable population. Is going to be more common. So children, of course, they're not going to have the same ability to fight back or to have that exercise autonomy over their life as an adult. And the same will go for women in terms of just men out strengthening women, physically. So that's where the force comes in. So yeah, force. Let me just give you a little bit of the tactics. There's four main tactics. Again, labor trafficking, it could be housework, it could be work in a massage parlor, it could be work in a restaurant, really. It could be really any place. Oftentimes it could be something secluded in the home, that they're not interacting with, anything secluded where they're not interacting with the public. So they're being isolated and forced through fraud or coercion as well. So let me get into what that means. Force could be gunpoint. That would be one example of force. Force could be someone grabs you and pulls you into a van. Someone forced you. Someone, many different. It could happen many different ways, but you are being forced, physically being taken. That is force. Okay, gunpoint. That's force. Fraud. Now that could be, someone forced you to sign a contract to agree to, fulfill however many years of, childcare or whatever. I'm just using an example. Someone, fraudulently got you to sign a contract that now you are legally bound to, or believe you're legally bound to. So that could also be, that ties into coercion. There could be fraud. There could also, you could be led to believe one thing and it's another, that's fraud, but there's also an element of coercion. Coercion is more so, if you don't do this, if you do not do this, this is going to happen. So if you do not do this labor, you're going to get deported. Or if you do not do this labor, you're going to get hurt, or somebody else is going to get hurt. So there's coercion is basically a threat. It's some sort of threat that if you do not fulfill what you're being told to do, there will be a consequence. Another tactic that is not so much in the definition, but that we also discuss in prevention education is seduction, and that would be it's still a bit linked to fraud or coercion, but it's kind of it's a tactic of its own. But that's more so being promised something, like being promised a fantasy that's not real. Like, um, if you do this, you're gonna get all this money, or if you do this, you're gonna have, this loving family. It could be a trafficker might promise that, hey, if you're willing to do this form of labor, whether it's sex labor or another labor, if you're willing to do this, we're going to make a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? We're going to be able to really drastically change your life. It could also be, um, sometimes with women, traffickers will rope them in, trying to get them like a modeling career. Like, hey, you're a beautiful young lady, and um, we could really help you be a model, but there's certain things you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to take these type of photos and do all type of this because nudity and whatever they're telling them to do is just part of the job, right? So there could also be that, like, well, you know they might not agree with it, but they're going along with it because they've been seduced mentally to say, I need, to in order to get these things that they're bribing. It's like a bribe. That's a more simple way of saying it. Seduction is more like a bribe. You're being promised something, but it's not really intended to be fulfilled. Whereas again, coercion differs in that it's more of a threat. So often there is bribery. Another tactic, yeah, fraud is very, like, the fraud kind of ties into a couple of them. Not force is its own thing, but I think fraud kind of ties into both the seduction, because you're being promised something that's not real, right? So I think seduction could be another word for fraud. And then another one is befriending. So that is the other key tactic. We usually, when we're doing prevention education, we speak on force, coercion, seduction, and befriending. So again, seduction could be that fraud. Um, so in the definition, force, fraud, or coercion. Befriending is another element, where usually it may be a friend. Someone may actually become your friend and then recruit you into this life. That's something that we do see. Or it could be, befriending might also just be someone like makes your acquaintance and offers you a job, and they really, that could be the idea of befriending there. Or it could also be a boyfriend. That's also very common. The person could come in, act as though, again, this is leaning a little bit more towards sex trafficking, but this could be any form of human trafficking, and it could be any gender. But the common narrative is that it's a boyfriend that comes in, you know, acts all loving in the beginning, acts a certain way in the beginning, really gains that woman's trust. She begins to depend on him. He figures out her needs, her vulnerabilities. He starts to fill those needs and prey upon those vulnerabilities. And she's befriended him in that sense, but in a relationship. And then, it's a bait and switch. So he's gotten her with a bait, and now he switches, and that's when the human trafficking ensues. So those are the four main tactics we speak on. Um, Again, in the legal definition, it's force, fraud, or coercion. We say force, seduction, coercion, and befriending when we're educating youth. So, yeah, that's essentially that. Um, what else can I speak to? This field was really not well known, like, say, so much until I feel like, I mean, it's really grown in awareness, probably say in the last decade, really. I mean, incrementally it was growing, but when I first got into the field was 13, 14 years ago. And back then, this was not widespread knowledge by any means. And I don't recall ever hearing about this, in terms of sex trafficking growing up. Like, human trafficking we just thought is an international phenomenon being trafficked from one nation to another. That's more how I understood it. Um, so yeah, that's how I understood it. And but yeah, it's definitely grown in the last decade or so. You'll see more in the news about it. You'll see more documentaries about it, more books about it, more organizations have grown. The organization I'm with um, was founded, I mean, right around the same time I started working in the field. It was just getting founded. Um, about the same time. I started in the field 2009, 2010, and then I started running the national campaign, IMSJK, co-organizing that in 2000. I was already getting involved 2009, but co-organizing nationally on the national level 2010, nationally and internationally. So anyway, I've seen the field grow a lot. Being in the field when I started, it was still just it seemed much more on the fringe, and we really had to fight. We really had to fight to get any lawmakers to listen and to take a second look at Sarah's case. Fortunately, she had some really great pro bono attorneys, great supporters, but even still, we really had to organize to get these things to lawmakers, to get them to really take another look at her case. um, and she was a minor. She was a minor um, when she took the life of her trafficker. And she was given life without any possibility of parole. That was back in 94, 95. And again, I remembered that case. That was really the thing that got me into this field, was just remembering her case when I was coming up, and just how relatable it was. And it just seemed common sense to me, that at the time, it was just seemed so common sense to me that when she shot, I mean, they were saying it was her pimp. I thought 16-year-old girl, 36-year-old man, they're saying that's her pimp. Well, obviously she was being abused, so she must have shot him in self-defense. That was common sense for me at 13, 12, 13. But I guess that was not common sense for the masses, or for media at that time. So that was not commonsensical in the early to mid 90s, right? Um, so that was the thing that really brought me back into this, that really brought me into this field, was that particular story. Although there are many stories out there, many different types of this out there, but it just so happens that that story stuck with me. So many years later, I was able to connect with her and get to work on her freedom campaign. Um, so yeah, since then, I mean, I've really watched things grow. That we were building, building with her supporters through all type of social media. But social media was still pretty new back then. Facebook was still pretty new, and Twitter. I mean, these things had been around, but they were still relatively new for the masses. And we were really working on organizing there. So there was not widespread awareness at that time. But I've seen it grow so much over the years, and even these other cases that came up behind Sarah's, which we looked to get involved in back then, but for various reasons, we weren't able to continue um, with holding that torch. Other people were kind of stepping in, and that was okay. Um, so yeah, but I've just seen so much growth, where now finally it's really being looked at as an issue of human trafficking versus an issue of just, especially with minors. But instead of just looking at it as prostitution, when there's children out there being exploited and somebody else is profiting off from them, it's looked at as a crime against children, right? So as it should be. So pardon, I will get back to this call. I will get back to this call. Let me see. Uh, pardon just a second. Okay, I apologize for that. Okay, apologize for that. So anyway, I've just been blessed to see how much the field has grown since I've been involved with it. and that there are now national organizations and movements, and we're able to go in and do prevention education on the local level with schools and all of this. And yeah, so again, I'm just looking to grow this another resource. Pardon, I apologize, y'all. I was just driving, and my hair is, it's taking me a while to tame my hair properly. Um, but yeah, so I've been grateful to see the growth that there has been and the movement building in the public conversation, the understanding that this is a crime. Human trafficking is a crime, and it's not just something that people are choosing to do. And there are debates about that in the field, about whether, I don't even really want to get into all that today, but there are debates in the field about whether, for adults, you know um, whether certain forms of illicit work should be legal. I'll say it that way. And it's a hot debate. It can be a hot debate in this field, but at the end of the day, my work is prevention. So number one, we want to prevent any exploitation from happening to children, from happening to minors. That's our key focus. And when we're able to prevent that, when we're able to prevent minors from being exploited, that will drastically reduce the number of adult women or men who are being exploited, because they've had a solid foundation. They have autonomy over their body, over their lives. So that's going to drastically shift things in that adult sphere as well. So it all boils down to prevention and intervention, which is the scope that I deal with. It's 5 o'clock. I really do need to wrap up. Normally, like I said, we start at 4. Start a little bit late today. So I apologize if I was short on this topic, but we will be back Wednesday with Women's Empowerment Network, and we can chat a little bit more about the topic. And then we'll be back next Monday, and we're going to deal with healing and healing practices. So again, just another plug. You can find all my content and all my links at earthsaylove.com. If you do want to follow along Mondays with the Mentorship and Advocacy program, that's on the Mentorship tab on site. The journal will be dropping any day by Wednesday, and that's just going to be a supplement for our Women's Empowerment Network, poetry, and all that fun stuff. So thank you for bearing with me as I am just getting started, and we are really going to step it up here this second quarter. So thank you so much for your patience. I highly appreciate it. We will be back. If, as always, I will start adding resources in the credits and all in the description as well. There are definitely resources out there. If you are going through something, find an advocate, find a victim's advocate you can speak with. If you need one if you can always call 411. If nothing else, call 411 and request a victim's advocate. If you have a specific issue, you can always ask for that resource as well. There is a human trafficking hotline. There is an intake line with Sailor Freedom as well, at sailorfreedom.com. You can find that. So thank you so much for being a part of my community. If you like the content that is beginning to be developed here, I am an artist. That's my main thing. I'm just striving to balance my time and resources to be able to bring you some new content. So stay tuned for that. But you can subscribe, like, if you have a question, comment, you can leave that in the comments section. And again, all my links are at the contact on my website, so you can support me in other realms. So thank you again so much. Peace to the chat. Thank you all for chiming in. I see the likes and everything like that. So thank you so much. I'll be back soon. Your girl, your sister, foremost your sister. Let me say that, because I am Earth and I'm your sister. So peace and blessings to the universal family. We'll be back Wednesday. And with that, happy Ramadan as well. Assalamu alaikum. Greeting you with the universal greetings of Peace. Peace, family.